Nancy Lagerquist. On the night of Sunday, July 1st, 1990, Nancy Lagerquist, an 87-year-old resident at Riverside Healthcare Center, was last seen alive. At around 3:30 a.m., a care worker witnessed the elderly woman sound asleep in her bed. She was not distressed and appeared peaceful. The care worker closed her bedroom door and moved on to the next room. Nancy had been a resident at Riverside since December of 1988. Born in Hamilton, Montana in 1902, she graduated high school at the age of 18 and spent much of her life working as an executive secretary. Nancy was an active member of the Missoula Business and Professional Women's Club prior to her retirement. She never married, had no children, and had little in the way of relatives at the time of her death. Those family members, a sister, 2 nieces, and 3 nephews, didn't live near the care home. By all accounts, Nancy lived an ordinary life in the care home. She was unable to walk, and so she required around-the-clock assistance. There was nothing about her background to suggest there was a target on her back at the time of her death. At 4:30 a.m., 1 hour after Nancy was checked on at Riverside on July 1st, a worker checked on her room once more. This time, however, the alarm was raised. The 87-year-old was gone. The 5 employees on shift scattered across the building in an attempt to locate the elderly woman, but there was no sign of her. 11 minutes later, at 4:41 a.m., the police were alerted to Nancy's disappearance. Law enforcement promptly arrived on the scene, accompanied by search and rescue teams. They carried out an extensive search of the home and the surrounding area. The residence was located along the Clark Fork River, and boats manned by police officers were dispatched along the water. At 6:30 a.m., the search was called off. Authorities had found Nancy dead near the riverbank, about 30 minutes downstream from Riverside. She had been murdered in a manner that was described by police as ritualistic. The circumstances of her death were violent, stemming from sexual assault with an object. Her body was then dumped into the water. To investigators working on the case, it soon became apparent that they would have their work cut out for them. The fact that Nancy's body had been put in the water had washed away any traces of forensic evidence, and her diaper has never been located. The police have never put forward a theory about the weapon used in the murder, and it, too, has never been found. Detectives soon theorized the culprit had entered and exited through Nancy's bedroom window, which faced the river, as the screen had been cut. However, the perpetrator had managed not to leave behind any evidence on the window, or sill, or in the rest of the bedroom. Furthermore, none of the alarms had gone off at any of the home's entrances, and all were in working order. It's unclear if the home was dusted for prints, but given the amount of staff, residents, and guests coming and going from the home, it would have been a very arduous task if it had. The only lead in the case was a man seen by a member of staff at around 4 a.m., walking through the car park of the neighboring Missoula Athletic Club, away from the river and towards East Broadway Street. He is described as being white, between the ages of 30 and 40, and weighing around 180 to 200 pounds. He has light brown, collar-length hair, a moustache, and brown-rimmed glasses, and was wearing an untucked white and brown striped t-shirt, tan-button front shorts, and white tennis shoes with white socks. His t-shirt was longer at the back than the front. This man was never considered a suspect, but was wanted for questioning. However, it's unclear if he ever made contact with the police or was even identified by them. Reportedly, the description led to the police becoming inundated with reports. Due to Nancy's minimal family ties, a family connection was quickly ruled out, after which the authorities turned their attention to staff members. Staff at the care home would be familiar with its layout and its security measures and would know who was best to target. Investigators felt that the murder could well be an inside job and homed in on one male staff member in particular. He was eventually cleared of being involved, but left the care home less than a month later. It is unclear why he left. After ruling out the staff member, the police began to look at the possibility that the crime was the work of an outsider. They noted that security focused on the doors to the home, not the windows, and speculated that Nancy was picked because she was in a room facing onto the river and was not targeted for any reason more specific than that. They interviewed a man named James Bailey on multiple occasions, but eventually dropped in as a suspect. Eventually, detectives looked back at the witness statements they'd collected regarding any other potentially suspicious deaths in the home. One nurse had drawn their attention to the demise of an 86-year-old woman named Bertha Scott, an Alzheimer's sufferer who was discovered dead in her bed on May 2, 1990. She was put into restraints at night to stop her from wandering off, and because she'd suffered from heart disease, her death was assumed to be from natural causes. Neither the staff nor her family felt her demise was suspicious, except for the one nurse who had noted a bruise on Bertha's neck. She was buried without autopsy. Around the time of Bertha's death, the care home staff had also noticed that there had been some tampering with the windows of the physical therapy room, although nothing ever really came of this. On the back of the nurse's comments, the police decided to exhume Bertha's body and double-check her cause of death. Her family was shocked when the police announced that she had actually been raped before being strangled to death. Bertha's life was rather different from Nancy's. She had been born in Pennsylvania in 1904 and was married 20 years later. She had moved to Missoula just 2 years before her death so that she could be closer to one of her surviving children. 4 of her 6 children had died before her, though she was succeeded by a vast number of grandchildren. During Bertha's medical examination, it was discovered that semen had been left behind. Although a sample was collected, it was too degraded to produce a DNA profile which would help the police find her killer. From here, both cases grew cold. In 1992, a man at another care home was arrested for sexually assaulting one of the residents. However, he was in prison at the time of the murders. The police also suspected Lloyd Chase Allen of being involved that same year, but he too was behind bars when the crimes were committed. In 2002, the Missoulian reported that several of the care home residents had spoken of a man who roamed the halls at night, but staff had never been sure if he was real or not because the residents' memories and testimony were often unreliable. It's possible this man was real and that there are more cases like Bertha's where residents were killed, but it was deemed that they had died from natural causes. However, without DNA evidence, a confession, or further investigation, it seems likely we will never see this case solved. Caser stops pretty places. Born on August 14, 2001, Caser stops pretty places and her large family were members of various Native American reservations in Montana, including the Crow and North Cheyenne nations. An extremely athletic individual, Caser was fond of basketball, football, running cross-country, and wrestling. In her teen years, she had performed in several plays at Hardin High School and participated in the school's choir. She had a big heart and was described as compassionate and loving by all those who knew her. She could often be found tending to stray animals in her spare time. But Caser's biggest ambition was to become a performer. She wanted to act and sing, and the future looked bright for the determined team until her life was horrifically ripped away shortly after her 18th birthday. Caser was last seen on August 24, 2019, in Hardin, a rural town less than half a mile off the Crow Reservation, where she lived with her legal guardian and grandmother, Yolanda Frazier. It's unclear where the teen was aiming to go, but one thing is for certain: she never returned home. She had planned the following day to meet with her mother to visit North Dakota, but she failed to turn up for this get-together. Her family quickly noticed that their texts were going unanswered, their phone calls simply rang, and that Caser was not active on social media, which was perhaps the most telling clue of all that something was wrong. Later that day, Caser's aunt, Percilia Bolteo, went to report her niece missing to the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office, but was told there was a mandatory waiting period before the report could be filed. This was later proven to be a lie. In Montana, anyone under the age of 21 is considered a minor, and that Amber Alert should have been issued. Instead, it wasn't until August 27th that Caser's family was able to file the missing persons report. The police reportedly told Persilia that the teen was probably out with her friends. There is no record, but following her disappearance, law enforcement attempted to search for the teenager. They also didn't hand out flyers, which may have helped trace her final movements and prompt witnesses to step forward. Persilia felt that because of Caesar's troubled past and history of running away, law enforcement didn't take her case seriously. Although much of the 18-year-old's past remains a mystery to the public, it has been noted in recent articles that she had some issues with alcohol. In April of 2019, she was found unresponsive at school because she was heavily intoxicated and she had to be rushed to the ER. Then, on August 29th, a passing jogger discovered Caesar's body by a woodpile in the back garden of a home at the intersection of Mitchell Avenue and Rangeview Drive, in the Hardin suburb where she was last seen alive 5 days earlier. The homeowner was out of town when her body was found and had no connection to the teenager. Caesar's family were not notified immediately that a body had been found. Reports of a teenager's remains being discovered began circulating on social media, and the family caught wind of the rumors. They began to fear the worst. Persilia went to the scene to ID the body, but was turned away without being able to view the remains, and the local media were not alerted to the fact that a body had been found. Caesar's mother, along with Yolanda, then went to the local mortuary so they could view the body on September 1st. But they were informed that the body didn't belong to the missing teen, and so the family continued the search. It wasn't until 10 days later it was revealed that the body was in fact Caesar's. The coroner ruled that she had perished on August 26th and that her death was suspicious. Her remains were already badly decomposed, so the cause of death could not be determined. Asphyxiation could not be ruled out. Following this discovery, the teenager's family kept the pressure on law enforcement to investigate the death. On September 12th, Caesar's mother, Geraldine, was told by Terry Bullis, the county coroner and the owner of Bullis Mortuary, that her daughter's remains had to be cremated in order to be returned to the family. Despite the fact this was against the family's cultural beliefs and would remove the possibility of further examinations of the body. Furthermore, the family had wanted the Dahl Funeral Home in Billings, Montana to handle funeral arrangements, but Bullis made them use his business and ordered Caesar's cremation before other family members arrived in Hardin. On September 14th, the family located the site where Caesar's body was discovered with the help of relatives who lived nearby. They had attempted to visit the area a few days earlier, but were unable to because the scene was no longer sealed off and there was no demarcation of where the body was found. At the scene, they performed a ritual ceremony and noted that the area was very visible and had high traffic. A neighbor, Jason Cummings, who had found the body, told the family that the police had removed Caesar's phone from her pocket and that he had told them to charge it so her family could be contacted, although they appeared to ignore this suggestion. He, too, had questioned why the crime scene hadn't been sanctioned off to prevent contamination. 5 days later, on September 19th, the family alerted the media to the case. The Billings Gazette told them that they called the sheriff's office daily for any crime updates and hadn't been made aware of the case. That same day, Yolanda, along with Caesar's father Alan, went to meet up with Captain Mike Fuss of the Bighorn Sheriff County's office. When they asked why Fuss had not made contact with the family or returned their calls, he told them he had been preoccupied with other cases. When they asked why the crime scene had not been sealed off, he explained that if investigators arrived on the scene before uniformed officers, then they did not need to seal off the scene. According to Fuss, the scene was only sealed off if officers arrive first. Then Yolanda and Alan asked why law enforcement had not charged and turned on Caesar's phone. Fuss was reportedly surprised that the family knew about this, and he said that the battery was dead, and so they didn't attempt to use it. Caesar's family countered this by noting that they could have charged the phone and looked at her recent communications, but Fuss said they couldn't get into that phone and that not even the FBI could. Furthermore, Fuss implied that Caesar had died from alcohol poisoning where she was found and seemed angry when the family told him they were offering a $5,000 reward for any information. He also revealed that the original investigator on the case, Jeremy Middlestead, had stepped down because he, quote, couldn't handle it. Notably, Caesar's family were not interviewed by law enforcement until this time. They also spoke with the Bighorn County attorney, Jay Harris, who told the family that the coroner, Terry Bullis, had a conflict of interest in his position as a funeral home business and the county medical examiner. Harris also noted that Bullis tended to quickly determine the cause of death as exposure to alcohol and natural causes under his charge as coroner. However, Harris was otherwise reportedly brusque and rude towards the family, and failed to provide them with clear answers to any of their questions. At one point telling them, "How do you know that nothing is being done?" On the 23rd, the family were notified that no missing persons report had been filed for Caesara, and that her name was not in the missing persons database. A week later, the FBI declined to take the case on, stating they needed more evidence that Caesara was murdered on the reservation. Interestingly, just days before Caesara vanished, she had filmed a video of several police officers beating her 15-year-old wheelchair-bound brother and uploaded it to social media. The incident involved several deputies from the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office, leading to several officers being reprimanded. It is believed one of the officers who responded to the scene where Caesara's body was found was one of those involved in the beating. This has sparked much speculation that the police were involved in her death or opted not to investigate in retaliation for Caesara attempting to hold them responsible for their actions. In August of 2021, 2 years after the teenager's death, a fresh report revealed that 4 witnesses had been discovered. The statements of these individuals are not fully consistent, but generally describe a series of events which led to an argument outside of a home on Rangeview Drive at around 3 a.m. on August 26, 2019, involving Caesara and 3 other unarmed individuals, including a 17-year-old girl, 19-year-old woman, and 23-year-old man. Some reports mentioned that Caesara had been hanging out at the house and that an occupant had purchased alcohol for her. Reportedly, her blood alcohol level at the time of her demise was 0.149. The argument that had occurred that night led to another nearby homeowner setting off his car alarm, hoping it would cause the group to flee. They did, scattering in different directions. Caesara was last seen heading towards the area where her body was later found. The new report also mentioned that no foreign DNA was discovered underneath her fingernails and that she was diagnosed with asthma shortly before her disappearance. Caesara's case is still unsolved. If you have any information about her disappearance and subsequent death, then you can contact the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office at 406-665-97. According to psychologists, most often teenagers commit offenses for 3 reasons: the desire to assert themselves and gain authority among their peers, alcohol addiction or addiction to illegal drugs, but most importantly, a sense of impunity. Even for the most serious crimes, minors often receive minimal punishment because their young age is taken into account. In our story today, a schoolgirl named Mackenzie Shirilla became the perpetrator of a terrible tragedy that took 2 lives at once. However, the girl herself did not feel remorse for her crime, and at the trial stated that she could do almost anything while staying alive, but she does not consider herself cool. Mackenzie repeatedly changed her testimony, writing off everything on a lapse in memory, and apparently, until the last moment was confident that she would get away with it. But the verdict of the judge literally dumbfounded the young criminal and her mother, so desperately defending her daughter. But let's get to the bottom of this. Who is Mackenzie Shirilla? Mackenzie Shirilla was born in August 2004 in the quiet town of Strongsville, Ohio, and was the 3rd child in the family. Her parents, John Shirilla and Natalie Stevens, tried to bring up their heirs in love and care, to give them a good education and encourage all endeavors. The youngest daughter was a family favorite. She was forgiven many pranks from childhood, and even serious misdemeanors often got away with it. Mackenzie grew up capricious, demanding, and selfish girl. She was used to the fact that parents always do as she requires, and was also confident in her own impunity no matter what she did. Classmates and teachers of the girl noted that in childhood she was quite a nice and open child, but with age, her character and behavior began to deteriorate. The girl threw real tantrums. If something went wrong, she easily lost her temper, behaved impudently and impatiently, swore, and could even get into a fight. Mackenzie did not consider anyone's opinion but her own. Her word should always be the last, and she put her own interests above all else. In adolescence, the character of the girl became simply unbearable, but her parents did not see anything terrible in this, believing that her daughter has a transitional age and she should be treated with understanding and patience. However, bad character was far from the worst of all the troubles. In high school, Mackenzie was addicted to alcohol, as well as sometimes dabbled in illegal drugs, but she got away with it. Often the girl's actions were reckless and carried a direct threat not only to her, but also to the people around her. Parents still did not notice, or simply did not want to notice the obvious problem. Like many of her peers, Mackenzie was a big fan of social media and literally never let her smartphone out of her hands. She often posted provocative pictures of herself smoking or drinking alcohol on her account, and she left equally provocative comments on them. Mackenzie's friends were just like her. Together they vandalized, organized pogroms, fights, sometimes stole, and several times came to the attention of the police. However, the young people were treated only with warnings and educational talks, which strengthened their belief in their own impunity. Dominique Rousseau, a young man named Dominic Rousseau, was also a native of Strongsville. He was born in September 2001 and was the fourth of 7 children to his parents, Frank and Christine Rousseau. The boy was raised with 3 brothers and 3 sisters, with whom he was always very close. Dominic studied well in school, from childhood years actively engaged in sports, and tried to lead a healthy lifestyle. Despite the fact that he grew up in a large family, neither he himself nor any of his brothers or sisters was not deprived of parental love, attention, and care. Spouses Frank and Christine were moderately strict with their children, but at the same time promoted their all-round development. Dominic always had a lot of friends. He was used to being in the center of attention and became the soul of any company. The young man had a bright and quite attractive appearance, was trim and interesting, so he also had a lot of admirers from a young age. However, he himself tried to avoid fleeting romances, emphasizing serious and promising relationships. After graduating from high school, Rousseau became a student at a local university, choosing the specialization producer of performing arts. He dreamed of linking his life with music and one day becoming a famous music producer. In addition, the talented and versatile Dominic wrote and performed songs himself. By the age of 20, the guy already had his own small business. He bought a car and rented a separate apartment in a good neighborhood. At the same time, he continued to play sports and was considered one of the best students at the university. First love. Dominic and Mackenzie met for the first time when the girl studied in the graduating class. It happened at one of the parties in the company of mutual friends, and this accidental meeting became fatal for both of them. Young people were complete opposites of each other, and opposites are known to attract. A handsome, curly-haired young man, well-versed in music, immediately attracted Mackenzie's attention. He was radically different from the guys she usually socialized with. He was educated, well-mannered, interesting, and could easily hold a conversation on any topic. Mackenzie herself had a striking appearance and slim figure, dressed well, and knew how to make the right impression. She turned on all her charm to draw the attention of the guys she liked, and she managed to achieve the desired rather quickly. In the fall of 2021, the couple began dating, and almost immediately each of them introduced the chosen one to their parents. But if Mackenzie's parents were delighted with her choice and considered Dominic a brilliant couple for their daughter, the parents of the guy had mixed feelings about his passport. On the one hand, the girl looked sweet, innocent, and tried to make a good impression on them. But on the other hand, something in her immediately alerted Frank and Christine Rousseau. Friends and family members of Cheryl were sure that Mackenzie, for the first time in her life, really fell in love, and sincerely hoped that the relationship with the chosen one will positively affect her character and behavior. Then no one could not even guess what tragedy would end this youthful romance. The couple began to appear everywhere together, holding hands and openly demonstrating their tender feelings for each other. So soon, the whole small town knew about the relationship. Those who knew Mackenzie well sincerely felt sorry for her boyfriend, but most just happy for them. What was wrong with her? Soon Dominic began to notice oddities in his girlfriend's behavior, her defiant antics and desire to make everyone around her do only what she wants. At first, he did not focus too much attention on it, writing off everything on the young age and the desire to attract attention. The young people made plans for their future together, and even planned to get married as soon as Mackenzie turned 18. They also planned to leave their native provincial town, and together go to conquer a major metropolis, ideally New York. There, before Dominic would open a lot of opportunities to build a brilliant career in the music industry and fully reveal his talent. But as time went on, Mackenzie's behavior became more and more alarming, and sometimes even frightened the guy. She demanded from her boyfriend that he did only what she wanted, and if he did not agree with her in something, she made scandals, threw tantrums, and behaved like a little capricious child. At first, Dominic tried to translate everything into a joke, but soon realized that this is the true face of his chosen one. In public, she was still trying to hold on, but being alone with her boyfriend spewed on him the whole storm of his emotions, and sometimes even pounced on him with fists. Mackenzie's behavior became more and more aggressive, and at some point, the young man decided that he had enough. He suggested that she take a pause in the relationship and sort out her feelings. But upon hearing this, Mackenzie had a public showdown in front of their mutual friends. She screamed, threatened Dominic that she would kill him if he left her, threatened to burn down his house and wreck his car. But by doing so, she only made him feel more confident that he was doing the right thing by ending this toxic and unrewarding relationship. Obsessive stalking. Mackenzie had no intention of letting her boyfriend go, and at first she acted as if nothing had happened. She continued to called him to various parties and other events, as well as exhibited in social networks of their joint photos, accompanying them with posts with declarations of love. When Dominic firmly told her that everything is over between them, she literally went mad with anger and rage. Mackenzie went to his house almost daily and shouted all sorts of nasty things, insults and threats under his windows. She called him from different numbers, left messages on his answering machine, wrote on social media, and emailed him. Mackenzie then swore in love and offered to try to start all over again, then again began to insult and threats. Russo was confused. He simply did not know how to react to such behavior, because he had never encountered such behavior. He tried talking, tried to ignore the former lover, and a couple of times even recorded her threatening tantrums on his phone. It got to the point that Sharilla, seeing the ex-boyfriend on the street or in another public place, began to scream and insult him in front of passers-by. She turned Dominic's life into a real nightmare, but he still hoped that a little more time would pass and she would leave him alone, switching to someone else. One day, in front of witnesses, Mackenzie declared that it was easier for her to kill Dominic than to let him go. Mackenzie said that if he didn't come back to her, no one would have him, and she would take care of it. The young man did not take these words seriously, although those around him realized that Mackenzie was not joking. Among the most frequent threats from the mouth of the schoolgirl were promises to hit and run over the guy with a car, as well as to put him in the car and drive off a cliff or stop on the railroad in front of a train rushing at them. Each option sounded terrifying, and each of them Mackenzie described in detail, as if she had planned it all out long ago and was just waiting for the right moment. An unexpected reconciliation. When Mackenzie realized that threats and insults would not help her to get Dominic back, but only distanced him, she decided to change her tactics. Mackenzie became sweet and charming again, stopped pressuring and harassing her ex-boyfriend, and instead tried her best to pretend that she realized her mistakes and wanted to change for the better. She talked about the upcoming enrollment, asked to help her choose a university, and also claimed that she had gotten smart, and most of all was now concerned about the final exams. Such changes pleasantly surprised Dominic. He, in spite of everything, still had tender feelings for the former girlfriend, and decided out of kindness to help her with university enrollment. Therefore, they again began to see each other and communicate. Gradually, the couple became close again. Dominic began to invite Mackenzie on dates, sought to spend all his free time with her, and believed that she had changed, matured, became more serious and responsible. He did not notice how he fell in love with her again, and all the former offenses remained somewhere in the past. However, This time the young people were in no hurry to announce to all friends and acquaintances about their reunion. Their meetings were more like secret dates, where they just enjoyed each other's company, avoiding the close attention of others. When Dominic's own brother Angelo learned about what was happening, he suggested that nothing good would come of it, but the young man in love did not heed his words. A devious plan. While Dominic naively rejoiced at being reunited with his girlfriend and the changes he thought had happened to her, Mackenzie herself hatched a terrifying plan of reprisal against the young man. She was so fascinated by the idea of a car and a spectacular car crash that she began to work out this scenario in detail. In her free time, she spent hours driving around the city, choosing a place suitable for the realization of her plan. However, there were no high and steep cliffs nearby, and going out on the tracks while waiting for a train seemed to her an unreliable idea. One day, Sharilla drove into a nearby industrial area, a fairly secluded place with no cameras on the way, and very few cars in the area. The schoolgirl's attention was drawn to a huge brick wall, and her sick imagination immediately conjured up a new, no less horrible plan. She decided that if she accelerated to the maximum possible speed and crashed into the wall, it would be no less spectacular than falling off a cliff into an abyss. It should be noted that initially Mackenzie planned to die together with her lover, so that their story was retold by all the inhabitants of the city. She even told her best friend about it, but her friend simply did not believe in the seriousness of her intentions, because Mackenzie had visited such delusional ideas before, but everything was limited to empty conversations. A terrible realization of the plan and an accidental victim. At the end of July 2022, just a week before her coming of age, Mackenzie suggested to Dominic that they go to an upcoming party hosted by their mutual friends. It would be a good opportunity to have fun, to unwind, and to let everyone know that they were back together and loved each other dearly. The young man readily agreed. He still didn't feel threatened by Mackenzie and believed in the sincerity of her feelings and intentions. The event was scheduled for Saturday, July 30th. Dominic and Mackenzie appeared in the middle of the party, holding hands, which immediately attracted the attention of those present. They looked happy, smiled, and openly showed affectionate feelings for each other. Friends were sincerely pleased with their reunion and noted that they are a very beautiful and harmonious couple. All evening and all night, the young people had fun, willingly photographed and without shyness, kissed in front of everyone. But no one even guessed what a terrible tragedy would end this party. The couple drank a little, however, like everyone else at the event, but Mackenzie, secretly from everyone, took a dose of illegal drugs, so to speak, for courage, so as not to change his mind, and at the last moment did not hit the brakes. In the morning, Russo and Sharilla said goodbye to everyone and headed for the car, but then a friend of the guy, Davian Flanagan, followed them and asked them to give him a ride home. Mackenzie tried to object, saying they had plans of their own, but Dominic saw no problem with giving his friend a ride. Not wanting to fight, arouse suspicion, or change plans, Mackenzie agreed, signing Davian's death warrant. Despite her lover's objections, Mackenzie got behind the wheel of the car. Her boyfriend sat next to her in the passenger seat, and her friend sat behind him. The car started and slowly pulled away from the party venue, heading out on its most recent trip. On the main street, Mackenzie drove quietly, keeping to the speed limit and trying not to draw attention to herself. At a stoplight, she stopped, though the road was empty. Mackenzie once again considered her plan, while her passengers dozed off. She later claimed that she wanted to die in the accident, but the perpetrator was obviously lying because she had fastened her seatbelt during the last stop, while her passengers remained unbuckled. When the light turned green, she drove off, quickly picking up speed, and then took a sharp turn onto a poorly lit secondary road leading into an industrial area. Obviously, the guys didn't immediately realize what was going on, if at all. It was as if the devil himself had possessed the driver. The car accelerated to top speed, but Mackenzie continued to press hard on the gas pedal, steering the car into a blank brick wall. A bystander and a miraculous rescue. There wasn't a soul in the industrial area early Sunday morning, so no one saw the accident or rushed to help. Only one woman who lived on the outskirts, not far from the scene of the accident, heard the bang and was not too lazy to go outside to see what was the matter. She saw smoke, and when she got closer, she realized that there had been a car crash, after which she ran back inside to call emergency services. Medics arrived at the scene about half an hour after the accident, but the two guys in the car could not be helped. They died on the spot. The girl behind the wheel was alive. She was saved by her seatbelt and airbags. Mackenzie was unconscious, and her legs were trapped in the mangled car, but she was breathing, and her pulse was clearly palpable, giving hope that she would survive. She opened her eyes several times during the process of being released from the car, but was obviously unaware of what was going on around her. Mackenzie was immediately sent to the hospital, where she was diagnosed with a number of fractures and internal organ damage. Blood tests showed that she was under the influence of alcohol and drugs. However, according to the doctor, perhaps that is what prevented her from dying from painful shock while help was on the way. Investigation, leads, and confession. Initially, the police, having received the results of Mackenzie's tests, assumed that she, being under the influence of illegal substances, simply did not realize what she was doing and perhaps tried to drive through the wall or did not see any obstacles in her way. In favor of this version was the lack of braking distance. It was not possible to talk to Sharilla herself because she was unconscious in the intensive care unit after a complex operation. However, she soon came to her senses and, realizing what she had done, began to sob and pour out her soul to the doctor on duty. She admitted that she purposely drove into the wall at a great speed because she wanted to kill her boyfriend and originally planned to die with him. Mackenzie also added that Davian was an accidental victim due to his own obsession because he asked to go with them. The doctor did not take the patient's rambling story seriously, deciding that it was a delusional state resulting from anesthesia and painkillers, as well as guilt over the death of a loved one. And when the police were allowed to talk to the recovering Mackenzie, she suddenly changed her testimony completely. Now Mackenzie claimed that she remembered almost nothing about the events of that night because she took alcohol and illegal substances. According to the girl, she had a lapse in memory after she got behind the wheel, and how Davian was in the car, she has no idea. However, the facts were to the contrary. The surveillance cameras were able to track the first part of the route the car had taken, and the footage clearly showed that Mackenzie was driving slowly, and according to the rules, until she suddenly turned onto a road leading to an industrial zone. Moreover, it turned out that Mackenzie had driven the entire route both ways several days earlier, and her car had been seen there at various times by at least a dozen witnesses. Back to normal. After being discharged from the hospital, Mackenzie recovered quickly enough and tried to get back to her old, carefree life. She had no remorse and was confident that she could get away with it. Mackenzie was once again active on social media, meeting with friends and making plans for the future. In September, she decided to go to a concert of her favorite band playing in a neighboring city. At that time, the bones of her legs had not yet fully fused, but this did not stop her, and she appeared on the concert stage in a wheelchair. At the same time, she wore bright makeup, dressed provocatively, took selfies with friends, and posted them on her account. In October, when Sharilla was on her feet, she went to a Halloween celebration dressed up in a pre-made costume. Mackenzie lived life to the fullest and even made new acquaintances, but on November 4th, 2022, she was taken into custody. Trial and sentencing. It took the investigation just over 3 months to gather the necessary evidence and proof to bring the case to trial. Mackenzie was charged with premeditated aggravated double murder and possession and use of a controlled substance that was found in her pocket and detected in her blood. The defendant changed her testimony several times, first citing a lapse in memory, and then, when her friend testified in court as a witness, to whom she revealed her plan, Mackenzie changed tactics, saying that she wanted to die with her lover. But even here there were immediately discovered inconsistencies, because she had previously fastened herself with a seatbelt. On August 21st, 2023, Sharilla was found guilty of all charges. However, an important nuance was taken into account, namely, at the time of the crime, she was not yet 18 years old. It was 5 days before her majority, so she was tried as a minor. Under state law, she was entitled to at least 2 consecutive sentences of 15 years for each murder, without parole. But because of her young age, she was allowed to serve the two sentences concurrently, meaning she would be eligible for parole in 15 years. By then, Mackenzie would be 33 years old. Both sides were unhappy with the court's decision. Family members of the deceased young people said they would seek a review of the case in order to increase the punishment, and parents and Mackenzie's lawyer, on the contrary, considered the sentence too harsh and filed an appeal. However, the judge left the sentence unchanged, noting that he did not believe that Sharilla would leave prison after 15 years. The defendant herself, in his opinion, did not repent for the evil she had committed, behaved arrogantly and even insolently towards the court. But now she will have enough time to seriously consider her heinous act. Every day, hundreds of thousands of individuals go missing worldwide. Although many are quickly found or return on their own, about a third are discovered deceased eventually. The remainder disappear without a trace, their fates enshrouded in mystery. Mysterious and unsolved cases of disappearances frequently captivate the public and become the basis for detective novels or fantasy films. Yet, sometimes reality can be more terrifying than fiction. The disappearance of 19-year-old student Katie Poor stands out as particularly unique. Her case was so baffling that even NASA experts participated in the effort to find her. Despite their best efforts, she could not be found alive. This shocking event deeply affected the nation, especially the normally peaceful town of Moose Lake, where Katie resided along with other students. Katie Elizabeth Puya was born on February 28, 1980, in the quaint town of Duluth in St. Louis County, Minnesota. She was the second child in a loving and ordinary family. She grew up with her older brother, and they shared a strong bond since childhood. When Katie started school, the family relocated to Carleton County and settled in Barnum. Katie was known for being sociable, active, and highly creative. She studied vocals, played guitar, and eventually began performing in a music band where she happily showcased her talents. Katie also had a deep love for animals. She volunteered at a shelter for stray cats and dogs and participated actively in cleaning and beautifying local parks. Her beauty was well recognized. In high school, she even participated in a city beauty contest where she achieved second place. After high school graduation, she attended college and moved to Moose Lake, a quiet and picturesque town in the same county as her family. By that time, Katie had been dating Mark for a couple of years. They both went to university and planned to get married. The couple rented a small but cozy apartment in a good neighborhood. Katie attended law school to study criminal law, while her fiancé focused on computer technology. They both worked part-time jobs to support themselves financially, save for their wedding, and avoid relying on their parents. Katie secured a job at a gas station near a busy highway where she took night shifts several times a week. She enjoyed this work because it allowed her to manage her schedule efficiently. However, her parents were concerned about her safety since she was alone at the shop during nighttime along the highway connecting several large cities. A place bustling with traffic around the clock, with various people visiting the gas station and store. Despite their concerns, Katie reassured them that there was no need for worry due to surveillance cameras everywhere and the presence of a nearby popular diner that remained crowded most of the time. On May 26, 1999, 19-year-old Katie Puya went to the store for her regular shift. It appeared to be an ordinary day. She switched with her colleague who had worked during the day and took up her position behind the cash register. Around midnight, a woman came by the gas station, filled her tank with gasoline, and walked into the store to pay and buy some snacks. After gathering her items, she approached the cash register but found it unattended. Confused, she waited for a while, then went to the utility room and called out. There was no answer. This felt strange, since the store was fully operational, lights on, doors unlocked. When no clerk appeared after 10 minutes, she decided to contact the police. Police arrived promptly, examined the store and its surroundings, but found nothing unusual or alarming. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood traces. Everything was in place, including a good amount of money in the cash register. Robbery was ruled out immediately. Initially, it was assumed that Katie might have left voluntarily due to an urgent matter. However, all her personal belongings were still in the store. Keys to her house and car included. Her vehicle was parked outside. This posed a question. How did Katie leave? On foot. Abandoning her car and purse seemed unlikely, pointing towards a more troubling scenario. The police reached out to Katie's parents to report her disappearance and inquire if they had any clues about her whereabouts or any reasons she might have abruptly left. Mr. and Mrs. Puya assured them that Katie was always responsible and would not abandon her duties as she highly valued her job. Katie's fiancé corroborated their statements, expressing his utter confusion regarding her sudden disappearance. At this point, Katie Puya was officially reported missing and the store treated as a potential crime scene. The investigation kicked off with a review of footage from 4 surveillance cameras installed in the store, each one positioned strategically to cover every angle inside. The initial hours of Katie's shift revealed nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing suspicious occurred during those early hours. Around 11 p.m., a girl walked into the store. She chatted with Katie for about 10 minutes but didn't purchase anything. From their conversation, it was clear that she was either an acquaintance or friend of the missing student. Approximately half an hour later, A entered the store. He looked around but quickly left. Shortly after, he came back in. At moment, Katie had gone to the back room, and it seemed he might have been observing her from outside through the glass door. He re-entered the store and headed directly towards the back room. Unfortunately, there were no cameras in that section of the store, so what happened next is unclear. A few minutes later, Katie and this unknown man emerged from the back room together and moved toward the exit. The man was walking behind Katie, holding her by the hair with one hand and pressing his other hand against her back. It was evident that he was threatening her with a weapon, likely a knife or gun, and forcing her to leave with him. Essentially, this constituted an abduction from her workplace. This information was crucial. However, further investigation faced challenges because there were no cameras at the gas station adjacent to the store or in its parking lot. Consequently, determining where the suspect took Katie, his vehicle details, and his direction of travel was impossible. Given that the gas station and store were situated on an isolated stretch near a busy highway, with no places to hide or go except along the road, it's likely someone would have seen if he had forcefully led her away on foot and contacted law enforcement. Therefore, it's presumed that he took her to the parking lot and placed her in his car. Another problem arose from the poor quality of the video footage from existing cameras. It was 1999 after all, and having any cameras at all back then was quite fortunate. The videos were grainy black and white images that rendered identifying features unclear, making it difficult to create a facial composite swiftly. Law enforcement and volunteers who joined the search scoured several miles around the gas station and store looking for possible clues, but found nothing conclusive. Investigators also interviewed Melinda, the sole witness who spoke with Katie shortly before she vanished. Melinda confirmed she was a close friend and fellow student working part-time at a nearby diner. She mentioned seeing a suspicious man harassing both a customer inside the diner and another woman in the parking lot earlier on. Suggesting to each woman that they should get better acquainted, both declined his suggestions and walked away separately. Melinda's work shift ended at 11 p.m. As she locked the door and prepared to go home, a man showed up again. He approached, asking if the restaurant was closing and what time it would open in the morning. Melinda found his question odd and hurried to inform Katie about the visitor, suggesting they call the police. Katie, however, reassured her that everything was fine since the store had plenty of cameras. Melinda then remembered the man drove a black Ford F-150 pickup truck. They left the parking lot around the same time, but he overtook her quickly. She recalled part of his license plate, 5 and 57, and the letter Y. This was an important clue, but in the late 90s, without a national electronic database, locating the vehicle took time. Both Melinda and another witness at a gas station provided only rough descriptions of the suspect. Given it was dark outside, they couldn't get a clear look at him. They described him as a white male with long blonde hair, aged between 35 and 40. He spoke without an accent and wore a baseball cap that partially hid his face. The surveillance videos were not much help either due to low resolution. For the first time, police sought help from NASA specialists to enhance image quality and reveal more details of the suspect's face. Using advanced technology meant for astronomical purposes, they reconstructed a clearer image of him. The task was complicated, strange angles, as he never looked directly at any camera in the footage. Still, authorities were satisfied with the final composite portrait. This portrait was distributed to police stations statewide and frequently shown on news channels. Citizens were urged to stay vigilant and report any sightings of individuals matching this description or driving a similar vehicle. Soon after, police began receiving dozens of calls daily, though most turned out to be false leads. About a couple of days later, authorities detained a 25-year-old man who bore a strong resemblance to the individual the composite portrait. Additionally, he had a prior criminal record for robbery and harassment. However, he was soon released due to a notable distinguishing feature: a large tattoo covering his entire arm, which the suspect in the video did not have. An important detail was that the man who escorted Katie out of the store wore a Yankee baseball team t-shirt with the number 23. According to Melinda, when the suspect approached her in the parking lot, he was dressed differently. Yet, upon reviewing the surveillance footage, she had no doubt it was him. A week later, a call came from Minneapolis. A worried man reported that the person in the portrait looked like his neighbor, who worked as a cleaner and drove a similar car. A couple of weeks ago, right around the time of the girl's abduction, this neighbor unexpectedly cut his long blonde hair and began growing a beard. This suspect turned out to be 50-year-old Donald Hutchinson. It was discovered that he had recently quit his job without any apparent reason, which raised suspicions. On the day of Katie's disappearance and the following day, he didn't go to work because he reported not feeling well. Former colleagues confirmed that he drove a black Ford F-150 with a license plate matching what police were looking for. Donald Aubin Hutchinson's real name is Donald Allen Blum. He was born in Minnesota in 1949 and grew up in a dysfunctional family where his father was an alcoholic who abused both him and his mother. As a teenager, Donald himself started drinking and displayed uncontrollable aggressive behavior that troubled everyone around him. Consequently, he was transferred to a special school for difficult children. At age 25, Blum was convicted and imprisoned after kidnapping and assaulting a 14-year-old girl. However, he served only 3 years before being released on parole. Shortly after, he was arrested again for assault and harassment, but received another short sentence. In 1983, Donald was arrested yet again. This time, he had kidnapped 2 teenage girls, taken them to a deserted area, and tied them to a tree. He assaulted one of the girls and strangled the other several times, then revived her, making it a game of life and death. Fortunately, a passerby walking with a dog heard their screams and saved them. Consequently, Blum served 9 years in prison. Upon his release, he changed his name, moved to another city, and avoided police attention for a long time. He got married after his release, and his wife bore him 4 children. On the surface, their family appeared happy. The man secured employment. However, his addiction to alcohol and substances turned him into a menace. His wife and children often suffered from his violence, but occasionally this monster sought other victims. Nobody was aware of Donald's criminal past. He went to great lengths to conceal it by changing his name and identity. He even altered his appearance by growing long hair and a beard that he sometimes shaved off. Initially, the police lacked solid grounds to detain him. They could only question him during their investigation. The suspect owned around 20 acres of land, just 12 miles from the store where Katie was kidnapped. In fact, right after Katie's disappearance, the police had already visited him upon learning about his black pickup truck. Donald claimed that he had sold the vehicle and that its license plate differed from the one they sought. He even provided a document as proof, which later turned out to be fake. Following these findings, the police secured a search warrant for his house and land property. They discovered an unexpected surprise in a large barn where Donald attempted to hide his black Ford F-150 behind old junk and furniture. The license plate matched the one identified by Melinda. With this discovery, Donald's calm facade began to crack. Nonetheless, he continued denying any involvement in Katie's disappearance. Yet even with this significant lead, the pickup truck, there wasn't enough evidence to arrest him at that point. The suspect's license plate was only a partial match, and there were neither witnesses nor video evidence confirming that Katie had been taken in that specific car. Consequently, the police shifted their focus to searching the house, aiming to find traces of the missing girl, or even Katie herself. The interior was spotless. No blood traces, no signs of forcible confinement, and no clues linked to Katie's disappearance were found. However, inspecting the property posed challenges as it spanned over 24 acres and required more than a day's effort, along with significant resources. To address this, National Guard personnel and hundreds of volunteers joined in the search and investigation efforts. The first day yielded no results. By the end of the second day, however, police stumbled upon peculiar ashes, suggesting that something had been burned or cremated over an extended period. Among these ashes were bone fragments, which criminologists meticulously collected and sent to a laboratory for analysis. While most bones were animal remains, parts of a human skeleton were also discovered, including a tooth that warranted closer examination. Experts identified that the bones belonged to a young woman aged between 18 and 23 years old. However, DNA testing faced complications because prolonged exposure to high temperatures had destroyed much of the material. When criminologists from other states joined the investigation, they managed to extract a DNA fragment matching the DNA of the missing girl. Unfortunately, this crucial evidence was deemed only indirect and could not conclusively establish the suspect's guilt. Hence, it became imperative to analyze the tooth found among the ashes to determine if it belonged to Katie. It was revealed that this tooth contained a rare filling made of silicone and zirconium, an innovative dental material. Conversations with Katie's dentist confirmed this unusual filling. He immediately recognized his work since he had used materials obtained from an international dental conference on her just a week before she vanished. Though all collected evidence remained circumstantial collectively, a combination strong enough, it sufficed for law enforcement officials to arrest Donald and detain him until trial proceedings concluded. Thus unfolded developments leading up to his incarceration, pending further proceedings. On June 22, 1999, the man immediately pleaded not guilty, sought legal counsel, and expressed his willingness to cooperate with the investigation, prove his innocence. During a more thorough examination of his belongings, law enforcement discovered multiple firearms for which he lacked permits. Shortly thereafter, Donald began confessing. He admitted to kidnapping Katie from the store, bringing her to his property where he strangled her and subsequently burning her body. However, he denied any coercion related to intimacy with the victim, attributing his inability to do so to the significant amount of alcohol and illegal substances he had consumed. Donald further claimed that he used only firewood and paper to incinerate the remains, but experts asserted that this method alone wouldn't suffice without additional fuel. That evening was marked by aimless driving around the neighborhood. Upon noticing Melinda at a gas station, Donald initially intended to follow her when she left, but then changed his mind. He overtook her and proceeded home to change clothes before heading back to the store where Katie worked. This accounts for discrepancies in eyewitness testimony regarding what he was wearing. 2 weeks later, Donald unexpectedly recanted his confession, asserting his innocence once again. He alleged that he had been coerced into confessing due to threats made against him and his wife. His wife attempted to support this claim during the trial by offering an alibi, asserting that he was at home with her throughout that evening and did not leave the residence. In a striking turn of events during the trial, two former victims from 1983 came forward. They testified about their experiences with Donald, depicting him as a ruthless sadist who had subjected them to torture and exploitation. The evidence presented along with the witness statements led the jury to unanimously declare the defendant guilty, sentencing him to life in prison without the possibility of. Subsequently, Donald's wife admitted she lived in fear of her husband, habitually beat her and their children. She expressed that she felt compelled to provide him with an alibi out of fear for her own safety. After disclosing, she changed her last name, took their children, and moved to another state where they wouldn't be known. On a related note, detectives working on this high-profile case suspected that Blom could be a serial rapist and murderer. They linked him to several unsolved crimes involving the disappearance of young girls under similar circumstances. Specifically, he was suspected in the strangling of Wilma Johnson, found in 1983, as well as the 1993 abduction and murder of student Holly Spangler. In 2021, Blom was transferred to a medium-security prison at MCF Faribault. Conditions there were much more lenient, and he referred to it as a vacation. However, after complaints and protests from Katie's family, Blom was moved back to a high-security facility in Stillwater, Minnesota. He passed away there on January 10, 2023, at age 73. Katie Pure's death has been covered extensively in popular television documentaries about real crimes. HLN Channel aired a series called Forensic Files, which featured an episode titled Tooth or Consequences, based on Katie's story. The Discovery Channel released an episode from their series New Detectives titled Fatal Abduction, dedicated to this particular case. Additionally, in 2010, a documentary titled From the Ashes was produced using materials from the investigation.
Costa Mesa 911.
There's a body in my son's apartment.
There's a what?
A body. A dead body.
A dead body?
Except there's been some sexual activity. She's dead. There's blood from her head.
There was blood from her head?
Yeah.
On May 21, 2010, a young woman was found murdered in the apartment of 26-year-old Army veteran Sam Hare. When Sam's father discovered the gruesome scene, they frantically dialed 911. Then I walk you to the bedroom. And that's what saw a body, a large lot of blood. I immediately called 911, but Sam was nowhere in sight. Who was that woman and what happened to her? Was Sam on the run after killing her? Located halfway between Los Angeles and San Diego, Costa Mesa, California lies on a coastal highland overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Despite its affluence, it's a laid-back beach community at heart. No one anticipated that this beautiful place would be where Julie Kibulishi would meet her horrific end. Sam Hare's parents, Stephen and Raquel Hare, became concerned when they hadn't heard from their son in a while. Sam was supposed to go to his parents' house that weekend, but he never showed up. On May 22, 2010, Stephen went to Sam's apartment along with his wife. There, a horrendous scene was awaiting them. Sam, what happened? What did you do? Panic-stricken, he immediately dialed 911. In this frantic call, Steve alerted the police that there was a dead woman lying face down in his son's bedroom with some of her clothes ripped off and blood coming down from her forehead. Curfin, I've been into the eye in a white body again on a dead body. Her lady, Eric Ward, on her head. I would go ahead and cuddle, but you know where you're starting. However, Sam was nowhere in sight. The incident came as a shock for the Costa Mesa community, where murders are very rare. When police reached the apartment, they did not find any signs that a struggle had taken place. Immediately as you walk in, you could tell it was a bachelor-type apartment. It was a teen apartment. There was no signs that there may be a bit of struggle or maybe a fight that had gone on. The apartment seemed to be filled with items you'd find in a typical bachelor pad. Empty beer bottles, burned cigarettes, a patio barbecue. But it looked relatively clean and neat. That is, until they entered the bedroom. Then in the bedroom, which begins to look a little suspicious, on the bedside table, there's an unused knife and there's a couple of books, one of them a combat how-to, another the wonders of sex. But then when you turn to the bed, a horrendous son. The bed was soaked red from the victim's blood. The deceased woman was lying partially on the bed and partially kneeling on the ground. Her pants were pulled down, exposing the lower portion of her body. From the looks of it, detectives concluded that she might have been sexually assaulted before her death. She died from 2 gunshot wounds to her head. He had 1 gunshot wound, top, center of the head. There was also a knife on the bedside table, but it appeared to be unused. Strangely, she was wearing a tiara, and scrawled on the back of her sweater were the words, "All yours." Her bag was found in the kitchen. From her driver's license, detectives identified the victim as 23-year-old Julie Kibuishi. Julie Kibuishi was born on Valentine's Day, 1987, to Japanese-American parents, Jun and Masa Kibuishi. Ju was the third of 4 children and their first daughter. She'd always been referred to as "my Valentine girl" by her parents. From a very young age, Julie took a keen interest in dancing music. Her mother said Julie started tap dancing when she was just 5, and that passion only grew over the years. According to her friends and family, she was a pleasure to be around. Her goofy and bubbly personality made everyone laugh. Not only did she exude positivity, but she often bent over backwards to help a friend in need. On one hand, she respected her Japanese culture, but on the other, she was a free-spirited, all-American girl. After graduating high school from the Orange County School of the Arts, Julie went on to study fashion design at Orange Coast Community College. Here, she met 26-year-old Sam Hare, and the two became close. She also tutored him in anthropology. She did not know that her kindness would cost her life. After scouring through the crime scene, detectives tried to piece together what had happened to this bright and beautiful young woman. All signs pointed to Sam being her killer. It was, after all, his apartment that she was found in, and now he was nowhere to be found. It was time for investigators to take a closer look at Sam Hare. Samuel Hare was born on May 29, 1983, to parents Steve and Raquel Kalberman in Los Angeles, California. As the only child to his special education teacher father and stay-at-home mother, Sam was doted on. He was very close to his parents, visiting them often even after he'd moved away. Although Sam's physical stature was big and strong, his friends described him as a big teddy bear. He was a fun-loving and easygoing guy. At a very young age, Sam had enlisted in the United States Army and served a tour of duty in Afghanistan and in Germany with 173rd Airborne. After 3 years, he was discharged and returned to Southern California, where he was born and raised, to attend college on the GI Bill. He wanted to finish college and then re-enlist in the Army as an officer. With that goal in mind, Sam Hare enrolled himself in Orange Coast Community College, where he formed a friendship with Julie, who was 3 years younger than him. But just like many war heroes, Sam developed PTSD from the 3 years he served in the Army. Had he somehow snapped and committed the crime in a moment of passion? As Sam was nowhere to be found, detectives concluded that he was most likely on the run after murdering Julie in his own apartment. The suspicion only grew stronger when they found text messages on Julie's phone from Sam's number. At around 2:45 p.m. on May 21, 2010, Sam sent her a text saying he was going to help a friend and then head out to go to his parents' house. However, just 2 hours later, his tone changed when he sent her a couple of texts begging her to come to his place. From the tone of the messages, Sam seemed like a man in trouble. He was clearly upset about something. As a concerned friend, Julie agreed to meet Sam. She said she'd be there for him like a family. While Sam's family was dumbfounded by the findings and worried that his life was in danger, these texts made him look more guilty to the investigators. It showed that he planned for her to come over. Additionally, Sam's car and his passport were also missing from the apartment, leading investigators to believe that Sam was probably on the run. His passport was missing. His car was missing. I look at it every legal guys, this is obvious. If I say how he is going to be our killer. Yet investigators would soon find out that there was even more to this story. Flashing back to 8 years prior, in 2002, the then 18-year-old Sam Hare was charged with another heinous crime. He was accused of taking part, along with 17 other men and women, in the stabbing and beating death of 19-year-old Byron Benito in Canyon Country. Allegedly, on the night of January 15, 2002, Sam, who had been friends with Benito since childhood, picked Benito up from his house and led his unsuspecting friend to an area behind a mobile home park where he was attacked and killed by a group of suspected gang members. He was charged with murder. However, in the end, he was acquitted of those charges, but that didn't change the suspicion in the minds of the investigators. Although Sam's family did not believe in his guilt, investigators were almost certain that they were after the right person. As Sam was trained to use firearms, they considered him armed and dangerous and on the run. Believing that they had a dangerous killer on the loose, authorities put an APB out for Sam. Meanwhile, the Costa Mesa police began monitoring Sam's cell phone and credit card activities in an attempt to locate him. Cops got information that there had been 4 withdrawals made from ATMs in the days since his disappearance. His credit card was also used at a pizza delivery place in Long Beach, California, just 20 miles away from Sam's house. Police expected to see Sam on the surveillance cameras, but when the bank sent them footage from the ATM cameras, they couldn't believe whom they were seeing. It was a teenager wearing a hoodie and a cap, withdrawing money from Sam's bank account. Neither police nor Sam's parents were able to identify the kid. Investigators concluded that he was most likely helping Sam, either to get away or to hide. Either way, Costa Mesa police were desperate to track him down. On May 26, 2010, they received information that his credit card had been used at another pizza delivery, and they set about tracking the delivery driver. After obtaining the delivery address from them, police headed to the address to apprehend Sam, thinking that they'd finally found his hideout spot. When police stormed the house, expecting to find Sam, they instead found 17-year-old Wesley Freelich, along with some of his friends. Although suspected earlier, authorities almost immediately ruled out Wesley as a suspect, but he did still have Sam's credit card in possession. The teenager depicted a shocking story that investigators were not anticipating hearing. He was, in fact, given the credit card with full instructions to withdraw cash. However, it was not by Sam. He didn't even know Sam. Daniel Wozniak, a local theater actor whom Wesley met through community theater, had given them the credit card. Wozniak told Wesley that he was a bail bondsman and needed to collect money Sam owed. Perhaps any other person would have declined it, but as Wesley looked up to Wozniak as an older brother, without realizing the gravity of the situation, the 17-year-old boy agreed to help. In total, $1,900 was withdrawn from the account. The name Daniel Wozniak did ring a bell for investigators, as they'd found an invitation to his upcoming wedding in Sam's apartment. But who was this Daniel Wozniak, and what was his connection to Sam? Did he help Sam to get away, or was he an accomplice to the murder itself? Several questions were yet to be answered. 38-year-old Daniel Dan Patrick Wozniak was born on March 23, 1984, as the youngest of 3 boys. Daniel spent a lot of time with his grandparents after school, due to his parents' long work hours. Dan grew up in a luxurious home, and the family often took expensive vacations. He was described as a good kid in school, who mostly got very good grades. He used jokes, singing, dancing, and magic tricks to get attention from people. He loved to be the center of attention. Realizing that he had a natural talent for stage performance, Daniel started acting and singing in musicals in his early 20s. He was pretty casual about his plans for the future. He could never hold a job for long, which forced him to move from job to job with very low pay. However, as years passed, he kept his passion for acting alive and continued to work in theater. It was here, in one of his musicals, that he found the woman of his dreams, a fellow actress. After briefly dating, they decided to marry. On May 26, 2010, when police tracked down Wozniak, he was enjoying his bachelor party in Huntington Beach, California. But how is Daniel Wozniak linked to Sam Hare? As it turned out, he lived in the same apartment complex where Sam lived. Assuming that Wozniak had either helped Sam flee or hide, or had been complicit in Julie's murder, cops barged into the private bachelor party for Wozniak with an arrest warrant. The blood drained from his face as soon as he saw the cops, leading the detectives to believe that he knew more than he was letting on. Police took him into custody for questioning. In the interrogation room, at first, Wozniak claimed that his only crime was participating in credit card fraud and covering for Sam. He further told the investigators that he and Sam hatched a plan to pull out all of his money from his bank account with the help of Wesley and then claim credit card theft. But Daniel claimed before they could carry out the plan, Sam made a shocking confession. He added that, after this confession, he dropped Sam off at a local shopping center and had not seen him since. Nonetheless, detectives believed he was still covering for Sam, and that he had more involvement in Julie's murder than he told the investigators. So detectives tried a different strategy. They took a DNA swab from Daniel, a strategy that made Daniel very nervous. He tried to collect his composure, but detectives could tell there was something wrong. Almost immediately, he started to add more details to the story. Tell me about the saying that you did. I told him that I needed to go see stuff from the theater. I said, don't help me with this, then he meant go on, I got the gun. I didn't really mind to get that reverse put him back in a shot. Detectives realized that Wozniak was nervous that his DNA would show up at Sam's apartment. Although he tried to say otherwise, cracking under pressure, he kept changing his story. After a long pause, Wozniak said that he knew about Julie's murder, and he helped him get away. When detectives reminded him that they had his DNA, he reassured them that it was not going to show up on Julie's body. He was still holding on to the fact that he had nothing to do with the murder. Detectives were expecting that Wozniak would reveal more details when he suddenly decided he was done with the interview. But with so much at stake, detectives could not let him go easily without knowing the full details. They told Wozniak that he'd be arrested for the accessory to murder charge if he did not come clean and give them full details. Wozniak had a lot at stake too. He had a wedding scheduled in just 48 hours, and he did not want to miss it. Under pressure, Wozniak started to crumble. The story yet again changed a bit. Seeing that Wozniak was about to break, detectives hastened the process by bluffing about the DNA. Although in reality, DNA test results wouldn't be back for weeks, detectives claimed his DNA was found on Julie's body. Shockingly, he did not protest the claim. He rather said his DNA was on Julie's body because he was standing right over her body. As it turns out, Wozniak was not as good of an actor in the interrogation room as he was on the stage. As his lies fell apart, he dropped yet another bombshell. This was a major red flag for the detectives because only one gunshot wound was visible to the investigators at the crime scene. Only later, when an autopsy was performed, was it revealed that there was a second gunshot wound. This confession from Wozniak meant that he'd been there when she was killed, which made him an accomplice in the murder, and investigators could now officially detain him. Yet, even though Wozniak was in custody, detectives still had to find Sam, and Daniel refused to talk. While detectives were searching for any clues that could lead them to Sam Hare, sitting behind bars, Wozniak called his fiancée, Rachel Buffett. Whether Wozniak knew those conversations were being recorded or not, he was about to get caught in his own web of lies. As Rachel chose freedom over love, she told him that she was going to call detectives with more information. Wozniak knew he had to talk to the detectives before Rachel could. Suddenly, he was in a panic, desperate to strike the deal with the detectives that he refused only hours before. But what he told the detectives this time was beyond their imagination. For the first time, Wozniak was ready to break down the timeline of his diabolical murder plan, which started with a simple favor from a friend. On the fateful day of May 21, 2010, Wozniak asked Sam, who considered him a good friend, to help move some boxes at the Los Alamitos theater attic in a local military base. While Sam was busy moving the boxes in the attic, in a note-down position with his back turned to Wozniak, the cold-blooded monster pulled out a gun and shot him in the head once. Initially, Sam never knew what hit him. After realizing he'd been shot, he begged Wozniak to help him. Without a shred of hesitation, this merciless killer reloaded his gun and shot him a second time, killing him instantly. After killing Sam, he was still not finished. In a cold and composed manner, he did the unthinkable by texting Julie from Sam's phone and luring her to Sam's apartment. In the utmost callousness, he left Sam's body in the attic and went to perform his play, laughing, singing, dancing, as if he did not just murder an innocent man and lure another to the same fate. Later in the night, Wozniak snuck into Sam's apartment, and once Julie was inside the apartment, he shot her 2 times in the head. He then staged the crime scene to make it look like Sam fled after assaulting and killing Julie in his apartment. However, he still needed to make sure that no one found Sam. In desperation, he proceeded to commit one of the most depraved acts possible. He returned to the attic and dismembered Sam's hands and head in an attempt to conceal the deceased's identity. He disposed of them at a nearby park. But even after these heinous acts, seemingly without a care in the world, Wozniak once again returned to the theater. In several cast party photos detectives collected later, he can be seen laughing and joking with other members. But perhaps the motive remains even more twisted than the murders themselves. It all boiled down to money. Loaded behind killing Sam was money and Sam who killed. Wozniak always struggled with money and maintaining employment. At the time of the murders, he was behind 2 months in rent, on the verge of getting evicted. Additionally, he had no way of paying for the grand wedding or honeymoon he planned. And that's when he learned of the $62,000 Sam had in his savings for his time served in the military. He killed 2 innocent people in cold blood so that he could have a grand wedding and enjoy an expensive vacation. If the confession was not enough, police found the evidence bag that Rachel talked about on the phone with Wozniak, thanks to Wozniak's brother, Tim. Tim had instructions to get rid of the bag, but he instead threw it over the fence at his parents' house. That backpack was filled with incriminating evidence, including Sam Hare's financial details, passport, his bloody clothes, and, most stunning of all, the murder weapon. Wozniak's DNA was all over the items, suggesting that he, and he alone, committed the double homicide. There was a cornucopia of others, the DNA, extrajudicial cases, the victim's financial information, everything a prosecutor could ever warrant, but of course that also led us to the murder weapon himself. On December 16, 2015, at the end of his trial, which lasted just 5 days, Wozniak was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. On January 11, 2016, after only 1 hour of deliberation, in what's described as one of the shortest death penalty deliberations, the jury recommended the death penalty to a very deserving Daniel Wozniak. On September 23, 2016, the judge sentenced him to death. It seemed like there was no end of deception in this case. Detectives discovered years later that Wozniak's former fiancée, Rachel Buffett, not only knew about the murder plots, but she'd been deceptive to the detectives. Though she denied all these allegations, she was arrested and charged with 3 felony counts of accessory after the fact, based on allegations that she'd lied multiple times to police investigators. On September 12, 2018, she was convicted on 2 of those counts with a maximum possible sentence of 44 months, and on November 8, 2018, was sentenced to 32 months behind bars. She was released from jail sometime in 2019. Life snatched away from 2 innocent people. Life destroyed for their family members. And all of this, just so one maniac could have his dream honeymoon. The only closure that the families can get from this is that this monster is spending his last days where he can't hurt anybody else. The case of Romina Nunez several years ago literally shocked the whole of Spain with its unimaginable cruelty and cynicism. The very situation in which this unfortunate young woman found herself, we can say, typical. Her husband beat her, and she kept silent, hoping that he would change. However, the denouement of this story shocked even experienced investigators who have seen everything in their practice. The victim's body was never found, only a fragment of it, which the sea threw ashore. But how did it happen? And could the tragedy have been avoided? To answer these questions, you need to understand who Romina was and why she never dared to admit to anyone in what trouble she found herself. Who is Romina Núñez? Romina Celeste Núñez Rodriguez was born in the fall of 1990 in the city of Asunción, the capital of Paraguay, and was the eldest of two daughters in a poor working-class family. Parents separated when the girls were still young, so their mother, whose name was Miriam Rodriguez, had to raise the children on her own. The woman had to work several jobs at once because her ex-husband did not help them financially at all and did not show any interest in the fate of the daughters. When she was still a schoolgirl, Romina got a job in order to help her mother and younger sister somehow. At the age of 17, the girl began a romantic relationship with a guy whose name was Christopher. He wooed her beautifully. They made plans for a joint future. But happiness ended as soon as Núñez learned that she was expecting a child and reported this to her lover. The young man immediately gave the chosen one an ultimatum. Either she terminates the pregnancy or they part forever. Romina deeply hurt the words of her lover, but after consulting with her parents, with whom she has always been very close, the girl decided to keep the child. Most of all, she feared that having had an abortion at such a young age, will never be able to become a mother again, so there was only one way out. Christopher kept his word. He broke off all relations with the girl and was never interested in her fate and the fate of his child. Romina, at the age of 18, gave birth to a son whom she named Lucas. However, with the advent of a baby in the family, and so deplorable financial situation worsened even more. Money is catastrophically lacking. And Mother Romina had to now support a grandson, moving to Spain. Romina, depressed by the situation, she wanted to somehow correct the situation and help her family. But find a decent job with good pay in Paraguay, she still could not manage. Then the girl called her maternal aunt, who lived in sunny Spain, and the relative invited her niece to her place, assuring her that it would be easier for her to settle down here and that there were more prospects in Europe than in Latin America. Not thinking long, the girl packed only the most necessary things, and having earned an airplane ticket to Spain, went on the road. She left her 2-year-old son in the care of her mother and sister for a while, deciding that she would pick him up as soon as she found a new place to live and a stable job. In the late summer of 2010, Romina flew to Madrid and from there traveled to its suburbs, the provincial town of Alcobendas, where she settled in the house of her aunt. Romina immediately actively began to look for work, and she smiled at her luck. Attractive and sociable beauty got a job as an administrator in a hotel, where she received a decent salary. Part of the money she sent home, and for the rest rented a separate apartment, so as not to embarrass hospitable relatives. Soon, Núñez met a man named Javier, with whom she had a stormy romance. The favorite a few years ago, just like her, emigrated to Europe in search of happiness and a better life. He was a native of the Republic of El Salvador, worked in construction, and seemed to be a serious man. However, when the girl became pregnant, the situation repeated itself. Javier was not ready for the appearance of children, but nevertheless, the couple tried to live together for a while. Unfortunately, soon after the birth of their common son, they finally broke up. The girl was again in a difficult situation because she was in a foreign country with an infant in her arms and simply did not know how to be further. For a while, she returned to her aunt's house, where she was accepted and helped in every way possible. When the boy was only about 6 months old, the young mother went back to work because she could not work. But a few months later, a new shock awaited the girl. For a long time, she ignored the poor health and weakness, writing it off to stress and fatigue. However, when Romina still went to the doctor, she was diagnosed with cancer. The young woman underwent several courses of chemotherapy, lost her hair, lost a lot of weight, but overcame the insidious disease. After treatment, the girl quickly recovered. She continued to work and hid the lack of hair with the help of wigs. Romina believed that the hard trials, which she managed to steadfastly overcome, will certainly be followed by a period of happiness. She saved money and planned to take not only her eldest son, but also her mother and sister to Spain. New lover. In the summer of 2017, at an event where Núñez went in the company of friends, she accidentally met a man named Raúl Díaz Chicón. He was good-looking, able to impress others, had a serious job, and was financially secure. He liked the smiling beauty, and he became interested in her, asking mutual acquaintances. Romina also liked this statuesque beauty, and when he soon asked her out on a date, she gladly agreed. Raúl was almost 15 years older than Romina, and he worked as a leading process engineer for a large energy company. He had a couple of failed marriages under his belt and had 2 teenage daughters from previous relationships. But the girl was not intimidated by the age difference at all. As for her personal life, she had a similar situation, with the only difference being that she was raising sons from 2 failed previous affairs. It only took one date for the couple to realize that they were in love and they didn't want to part with each other anymore. Romina, overwhelmed by her new feelings, literally fluttered around, telling her friends how happy she was. Her new lover gave her small gifts and pleasant surprises almost every day. He arranged romantic dates, sent flowers with touching cards, and said compliments. Romina believed that she had finally met her true love and found a man who would accept her and her sons. However, soon the girl began to reach very unpleasant rumors about her chosen one. In particular, it was said that he was rude and even cruel with his previous spouses, and because of this, in fact, broke up both his marriages. But Núñez did not want to believe it, although she drew attention to the fact that Raúl did not maintain any relations not only with his former wives, but also with his daughters. However, a significant difference in age and the presence of heirs from previous relationships on both sides did not become an obstacle for the lovers. Just 6 months after meeting, they decided to live together and settled in a luxurious villa on the island of Lanzarote, part of the Canary Islands. This place seemed to the girl a real paradise, but her happiness lasted only a short time. From a dream man to a domestic tyrant. First-time lovers lived in threes, along with Romina's youngest son. Raúl tried to treat the child well, and the girl even thought that he would be an ideal father for her boys. She herself, Raúl, promised a long and happy life together, in which she would not need anything, and he would fully provide for her and the children. The girl in love believed the words of the chosen one, and when he offered her to become his lawful wedded wife, without hesitation, agreed. But only Raúl insisted that they need time for 2, so that they could be alone and enjoy each other's company in full after the wedding. In fact, he not only did not want to take Romina's eldest child from Paraguay, but also dreamed of getting rid of her youngest son. However, the young mother believed her lover and did not listen to what her friends told her, who noted the strange behavior of the man. In June 2018, Chicón bought for the bride and her child tickets to Paraguay and 1 return ticket, just for Romina. When the girl flew home and told her mother and sister about her chosen one, the women were somewhat confused by Raúl's behavior. They doubted the sincerity of his intentions and assumed that he just wanted to get rid of someone else's child in his house. But the girl was offended by such talk, and she even had a little quarrel with her loved ones. A few days later, she flew back to Spain, promising that in the fall she would fly back for the boys. When Romina returned, a warm welcome awaited her, and for 2 months, she was perfectly happy alone with Raúl. However, in August, just a few days before the wedding, a man brutally beat Romina. This incident was a real shock to her, but the groom, literally on his knees, begged her forgiveness, promised that such a thing will never happen again, and she believed him. Núñez did not file a police report on her lover and did not tell anyone about what happened. And on August 10th, making up bruises on her face, she went to the wedding with the man who would soon take her life in cold blood. one last trip home. 2 weeks after the wedding, the girl flew back home to Paraguay, not to pick up her sons as she had planned earlier, but just to see her family. Her mother and sister were quite puzzled by the changes that had happened to her in the short time they had not seen each other. Romina looked upset and even lost. She had a noticeable limp, and there were bruises on her neck, which she tried to hide with a scarf. To all questions, Romina either kept silent or claimed that she had accidentally injured herself. Romina spent almost a month at home, which also surprised her relatives as she had just gotten married. However, the newly married wife said that her spouse himself suggested that she visit the children because she had not seen them for a long time and missed them very much. Then Miriam even praised her son-in-law for his generosity. But still, the woman did not understand what was going on and why her daughter looked so unhappy. In mid-September, Romina, secretly from her mother, borrowed money from relatives for a return ticket to Spain because her husband simply refused to pay for her return. This should have been a clear signal that flying back was not worth it, but Núñez still hoped that everything would work out and the marriage would be happy. On September 17th at the airport, her mother, sister, and sons saw her for the last time. The mysterious disappearance of a mother of 2 children. Since returning to her husband, Romina's life every day more and more resembled a terrible dream. Raúl, as it turned out, used illegal substances, and now he stopped hiding his addiction from his chosen one. Being under the influence of illegal substances, he turned into a real beast and literally tortured his wife. But every time she tried to leave him, the man promised to stop and swore that this would not happen again. Usually after the beatings and threats, there was a temporary lull, when the husband became loving and caring again, gave gifts and arranged romantic dates. But such periods became shorter and shorter, and scandals with manhandling occurred more and more often. Shortly before the new year, Romina confessed to her best friend that she is afraid of her husband and believes that one day he may kill her. On December 29th, Raúl again beat his wife, so much so that she was forced to seek medical help. The hospital suspected something wrong and wanted to call the police to record the fact of beating. But at that moment, her husband appeared in the department and said that Romina had fallen herself and there was no need to involve law enforcers. The girl only confirmed his words and, refusing hospitalization, went home. On January 1st, 2019, Miriam, Romina's mother, tried to call her daughter several times, but she did not pick up the phone. Then the woman dialed her spouse's number to find out what was wrong, but there was no answer either. After several days of silence, the mother-in-law sent Raúl a message in which she wrote that she was going to go to the police. This time, the son-in-law reacted instantly and called back, saying that he and Romina quarreled on December 31st, after which she packed her things and left him. The man assured that everything is fine. Soon the wife will cool down and return. Because before, according to him, this has already happened. But Romina's mother was not convinced by the words of her son-in-law. She felt that something had happened to her daughter and insisted that Raúl went to the police. Only on January 8th, under pressure from relatives of the wife, Raúl still filed a report on the disappearance of his wife. However, this time he told a slightly different story, adding that after the quarrel, his wife had taken his money, and he thought that Romina might have flown to Paraguay to visit the children, so he was not particularly worried until his mother-in-law called him yesterday. What is Raúl hiding? Raúl was constantly confused in his testimony and contradicted himself, which caused a lot of questions and suspicions. Then the law enforcers seriously decided to take him seriously, as well as to find out how the couple's life had been. Having questioned friends and relatives, they realized that not everything was not smooth in this marriage. Romina repeatedly complained to loved ones about her husband's abuse, but never went into details, and others often noticed bruises and abrasions on her body. It was decided to put Ciccone under secret surveillance, and all his telephone conversations were tapped. But the man seemed to sense that he was being watched and for a long time behaved extremely cautiously, not giving any clues or reasons to suspect himself of anything. Nevertheless, the investigation continued, and soon it became known about the visit of Nunez to the hospital on December 29th with signs of serious beatings, and how her husband almost forcibly took her away from there, forbidding her to go to the police. And a few months earlier, Romina did file a domestic violence report, but withdrew it the next day. A week later, Raul calmed down a bit, and in a telephone conversation with his relative, who worked in the police, blurted out that his wife was no longer alive, but her body would never be found. This was a good reason for the man's arrest as the main suspect in the case and his detailed interrogation at the station. The suspect's version of events according to Raul? His wife had had too much to drink on New Year's Eve and began to scandalize him, demanding that he immediately move her children into their home, and when he said he was not ready for that, she threw a tantrum, started fighting and throwing at him everything she could get her hands on. Then the man allegedly left the house for a couple hours until everything settled down, and when he returned, he found Romina in the bathtub without signs of life. According to his version, the woman suffocated because she was very drunk, but he was afraid that he might be suspected of involvement in her death, or even accused of murder. So Raul decided to remove all traces and then report her disappearance. But the way he admitted he had disposed of the body shocked everyone. Seacombe said that he decided to burn the woman's body on a barbecue in the courtyard, and since they lived in a luxury complex with a large surrounding area, the neighbors could not see what he was doing outside his house and could not smell the odor produced by the burning of human flesh. However, Raul miscalculated because the barbecue did not work on the principle of a crematorium, and in a few hours the remains were not burned. Then he took them out of the fire, divided into parts, packed in different bags, and a couple of days later rented a car, which took the dismembered body in the wild and deserted part of the island, where he threw into the sea from the rocks. The search for the body and evidence police spent weeks combing the shoreline in and around the areas where Raul said he dumped bags of his wife's remains. Divers were also involved in the search for body fragments on the bottom, aviation, and a considerable number of volunteers. But all efforts did not bring any results. Meanwhile, on January 16th, Romina's husband was formally charged with domestic violence as well as the murder of his wife. This came after his home was thoroughly searched using specialized equipment and luminol, which revealed numerous washed-up traces of blood in various rooms. It was also found that the man had been ordering caustic soda, used to remove organic contaminants, and paint from the internet. As it turned out, in one of the rooms on the second floor, he was so thoroughly mopping up a bloody stain on the flooring that he damaged it and decided to paint over it. According to the version of the investigation, it was in this room that the suspect dismembered the body of his spouse. Moreover, there on the floor was found a broken fragment of Romina's fingernail with traces of blood and Raul's epithelium, which could indicate that the victim was alive and resisted. Also in the bathroom, on the tiles on the wall, they found Romina's contact lens stuck on the wall, which could have gotten there from a strong blow to the face. Unfortunately, despite their best efforts, law enforcers were unable to find any remains. But at this point, the station received a call from a tourist who reported that a lung fragment had been thrown onto the beach. He could not say with certainty whether it belonged to a human or an animal, but having heard that a body was being searched for on the coast, decided to report his find to the police. Toward the end of February, an expert examination confirmed that the lung fragment found belonged to the missing Romina. Trial and conviction. Despite the evidence found and the results of the examination, Raul continued to insist on his innocence. He stuck to his initial theory that the woman had drowned herself in the bathtub while highly intoxicated. Although evidence found in the house indicated a fierce struggle, the man also said he did not use any implements or tools to dismember the body. He allegedly tried to burn it completely on a barbecue, and afterwards the remains, due to prolonged exposure to the fire, fell apart on their own, and he just put them in bags and took them away. Such a claim was untrue for several reasons. First, the body of the adult Romina could not have been placed on the fixture in his yard. Secondly, even after prolonged exposure to such temperatures, the bones could not become so fragile that they could fall apart without the use of tools. And in order to separate the lung from the body, it was necessary to open the chest, which could not be done with bare hands. The investigation failed to establish how exactly Raoul took the life of his wife, but judging by the traces of struggle found in the house, it was suggested that he could beat her to death. There was also no doubt that Ciccone had dismembered her body in the very room where he later had to repaint the floor to cover the bloody traces. Raoul's trial was delayed by the COVID pandemic, so the sessions were repeatedly postponed and rescheduled. During this time, Raoul changed several lawyers, and under pressure of evidence, he did admit that he had accidentally killed his wife during a scuffle, rather than finding her dead in the bathtub as he had previously claimed. Nevertheless, he continued to insist that she was drunk and violent. It was not until June 2023 that the defendant was finally found guilty, except that the sentence Romina's loved ones considered too lenient. The man was sentenced to 12.5 years for involuntary manslaughter, 2 years for proven domestic violence, 1 year for causing serious bodily harm in December 2018 when Romina went to the hospital, as well as several months for abuse of the body.